So it's a vicious cycle of being cold, going pee, having to warm up and drinking more coffee. Welcome, everyone, to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. I think we're at we got to be close to episode 90 now, Andrew. I lost track at 7, but we're almost 90. Maybe this is 90. Who knows? But you know what isn't 90? It isn't 90 degrees outside anymore. It is freezing cold. And I thought because of that one fact, that may make you happy, that may make you sad. But this episode, we're going to be talking all about cold water fishing, whether that be ice fishing or fishing on the bank in the rivers. Now, if you're new to this podcast, my name is Jesse. I'm the producer of this show. And with me, the guy with the huge beard, Andrew.
Hello, everyone. I help with content creation by just being in it.
And that's not a real beard. It's CG. It's the only way we could make it that glorious. We've been fishing together for over 20 years. And we have lots of interesting stories. We like to fish with a lot of different people around all of Ontario. So we're going to relay some of the information and some of the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years so that you guys can, maybe pick up some of these things, get better at fishing. And if not, you're already the best at fishing, apparently. Hopefully we can entertain you on your commute to work. So before we get into our main topic, we actually have, for the first time in a few weeks, instead of an interesting fishing fact, we actually have this week, story time. And to handle that story, Andrew.
Well, today on date of recording, we had some good freezing rain. I was scraping off my car and realizing I hate this, but it made me think of ice fishing, obviously. And it reminded me of when I had no hut. And so I decided to make my own, or attempt to make my own, I should say. Now, Jesse and I, we've used a few different huts, some kind of cheap ones that kind of fold out and pop up, and you got to, slide some posts in it. We have a nice one now that's like a clam. It all pops out, for a nice big tent for overnight trips. But we haven't always been this fortunate. There are many times we would have, we just walk out, be sitting on a bucket. If we thought to bring a bucket even, sometimes just be sitting on the ice, crisscross applesauce, hoping for a perch, which never came. Sometimes I would drive my old Cavalier out on the ice because the ice used to freeze really thick back then. So I'd be driving on 2 feet of ice on Lake Simcoe, no issue whatsoever. And I'd fish right out the side of my door, which that actually was probably the best thing I did before we actually got that other hut because it was a rigid structure. Now, the story that I've kind of been rolling up to is I tried to design, make, and fabricate a temporary portable hut. At the time I was in plumbing, I still am, but I thought, hey, I can just make a ABS, drain pipe frame, wrap it in a tarp, and screw it to the ice. Like that, at least get the wind off us. Because so many times we'd go out there and all we wanted to do is get the wind off our back, The temperature is cold, but it's way colder with wind. So I decided I'm going to start making this thing. So I got some big eye bolts. Let me tell you, regular wood eye bolts don't screw into ice very good. I didn't know that until I tried doing it. The downside is we didn't even really get that far as to put more than 1 or 2 of those bolts in the ice because when trying to set this up, the wind was blowing moderately fast. And because I wanted to be able to assemble and disassemble this hut, all of my framework, all of my ABS plastic 1.25" pipe that I thought this would be rigid enough, I'd only ever set it up in the basement of my house. So I set up this frame, I wrapped a tarp around it, like, this is great, this will work perfect. I can, sit in here with any wind whatsoever, just on the empty frame. It was like falling apart in the ice. Do you remember trying to set that up, Jesse?
I hope no one was watching it because it was pretty sad.
and then we finally get some of the structure together. I'm like, what if we start, wrapping it in the tarp? The tarp will hold it together so it won't just fall apart. We bring the tarp out and this, I don't know, maybe it was 10 kilometer an hour winds. Not crazy, but definitely substantial when there's zero structure on the ice. And it's just catching this tarp that I had sewn into a square shape. So it's like a giant kite just trying to pull me across the ice. Yeah, long story short was we had a bunch of garbage we had to walk around with all day because all that stuff was absolutely useless at forming a structure. And I think we ended up drilling a hole beside an unused ice hut that was out there just so we'd have, wind off our backs by using someone else's structure. That was my first attempt and only attempt at trying to make my own ice hut, a portable ice hut, I should say. If you make your own out of, plywood box and all that stuff, that's cool. I would have no issue doing that. It would be solid. I'm confident in that. But trying to design and fabricate my own portable, disassemblable ice hut was a waste of money. A good 2 hours of fishing time on the lake that day and many hours of trying to make it at home. So the lesson is, if you want something done right, don't do it yourself.
I always say to that, sometimes I'll have people that want me to build something for them at work. And sometimes it's at the point where you say, you know what? It may sound like it's going to be cheaper to make it yourself, but I guarantee that you can buy something already made that will look way better than trying to do it your DIY self. Now, we have seen some pretty creative DIY fishing huts over the years. This particular one, it was very comedic. It was hilarious. I tried to block out those memories. In fact, it was kind of embarrassing. Andrew's trying to do it, and I was just pretending I didn't know him the whole time. It's like, oh, hey there, random stranger. Do you need help? I actually just forgot about that until you mentioned it right now. That's pretty sad. But anyway.
And all we had was a hand auger there. It was like an 8-inch hand auger, and it took forever to drill holes. Like we'd maybe drill 4 a day and we'd spent.
Yeah, good times. Not really. And that's a really good story time, really. For this episode, because this episode, we're going to talk all about fishing in cold weather. May that be ice fishing, which is something that a lot of people already have started doing up north. A lot of people down here near us are excited for it. Or whether it be your steelhead fishing or your trout fishing or your pike fishing from shore in the winter months, which is something that a lot of people do this time of year. There's a lot of people that fish spring till fall, and then they hang up the towel, so to say, and they do other things. That's fine. But if you're someone that's hardcore and you have to scratch that itch throughout the winter, the main thing is being comfortable. And there's a bunch of equipment and things that we're going to recommend that you have. You probably already have some of this, but if you're like us, you're just getting your cold weather fishing stuff together or your ice fishing stuff, and you might want to get a little checklist and make sure you have everything, because things get lost. And when you fish with Andrew, things get stolen. So you might want to check all your stuff so that you make sure you have everything so that you're comfortable. Because the worst thing when you're ice fishing or when you're fishing in cold weather is getting cold. So I thought we could cover a few things that will help us be safe, first of all. Okay. Safety on cold water, also ice fishing. We're going to kind of talk about ice fishing because I was going through my stuff yesterday and today. I got a bunch of new shelves for my podcast studio here. So I'm taking a bunch of this stuff out. I'm putting it up on shelves. I was going through some of my ice fishing stuff. And one thing that fell out of my bag, and I'm glad that I found it, was my ice picks. Now, if you're not aware what ice picks are, why don't you describe it, Andrew, in the most basic terms of all time? And no, they're not weapons.
Not designed to be weapons, at least. But
fair enough.
They're not the kind of like ice. It's not an ice climbing axe, if you're picturing that climbing a mountain. Ice picks are essentially 2 plastic handles, so that you can actually, ergonomically grip them so they don't fall out of your hands or slip out, with a couple nail spikes sticking out the bottom. So it's just usually about an inch long or so, maybe a little bit less, just so you're going to stab into the ice and pull yourself forward. If you fall in, you can climb forward using those. And they're attached with a lanyard between the two, so you can kind of just wrap it around your neck or through your sleeves even, so it doesn't get lost if you do let go with your hand or it slips out of your hand.
Exactly. And the main thing that we say to people is if you're ever walking on the ice, you should always have ice picks. Ice picks are like one of the biggest essential item that you could have. A float suit is great, but you need ice picks to actually, if you fall in the water, heaven forbid, through the ice, these ice picks are the main thing that's going to help you get out in a more effective way. And like Andrew said, they go around your neck. They're on like a piece of string or like a lanyard or something. The worst place to have ice picks is literally in your fishing bag. That's the worst place. Everyone's, oh yeah, I got ice picks, but they're in my bag over there. It's like, well, that's not going to help you if you fall in. The last thing you want to do is be falling in and yelling at your buddy to find my ice picks, or if you're by yourself, which don't recommend in sketchy ice conditions, try to go with someone. But ice picks, they're cheap. They're $15, $20 at the most. You can get retractable ones so that they're not just, hanging sharp daggers on your coat ripping you up when you're fishing. But I have ones that click together and you wear them like a necklace. And if you happen to fall in and you need to get out, you'll be very happy that you have those hanging around your neck where they're easy to grab. Make sure you have them. Again, they're not expensive. And an interesting fact, so I was just going to say, is it kind of reminds me of screwdrivers, right?
Yeah.
Like ice picks. And I was seeing some information. It was like early versions of ice picks were actually sharpened screwdrivers. So guys would like have two screwdrivers that they sharpen the tips and then they tie it on a piece of rope around their neck. Now that if you want to do that, that's fine. Like that's literally what ice picks are, but it seems kind of sketchy. So you might want to just buy the $10 ones that are already pre-made and it might work a little bit better for you.
Yeah. I was going to say that they're not expensive to get a set of ice picks. And if you're fortunate like me, I found a pair in the middle of the lake.
Was it beside a big crack in the lake?
I'm hoping it was just kind of lost on some guy when they fell off his neck or something like that. And I hope he didn't fall in before they fell off his neck. But we were just on the walking back one day ice fishing, and then you saw, hey, what are these things? I didn't know what they were at first, but yeah, they clip together. They like Jesse said, they're like a necklace, so they're not loose and stabbing you. But now, to make sure that I don't lose them, I'll actually thread it right through my coat sleeves, kind of like idiot mittens, where it has that string going around your whole back. That way, even if I lose it or lose grip of it, it's still right there at my hand. So it's a long enough rope to be able to do that, like to have your full span of your arms holding each one. So, but yeah, vital importance, absolutely.
Remember that year that I lost my ice picks and then Andrew magically found some? It might have been mine. Andrew's a bit of a vulture sometimes. It's okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a float suit. Now, we're not going to go super in depth because next month in January, we actually have a guest that is someone that's in the ice fishing industry. And they are going to talk to us in depth about ice safety and spud bars and safety and all that kind of stuff. So we're just going to kind of talk about a few essential items that you should get ready to get. They're going to talk about how to use them. So we'll go more in depth in January. Stay tuned for that. But the next thing I want to talk about is a flotation suit because it's very important early ice. So early ice, this time of year, there's still a few lakes that don't have ice on them down here. A lot of the lakes up north, they have ice on them. Is it safe ice? Not a lot yet. It's still December. One thing that you want to do if you're fishing on thinner ice, use caution, but you should, if you can afford it, wear a float suit. Me and Andrew both have float suits now. Thank goodness. We fished many years without them. They are expensive. They've come down in price a bit, but that's the main thing that I hear people, I've worked at tackle shops and that was the main thing people said. Like, I would love to get a float suit, but they cost $600, $700, $800, $1,000, whatever. And then people always be like, well, you can't put that price on your life, pal. It's like, yeah, you can't. But at the same time, I don't have $800. So I'm going to, but why don't you kind of describe, Andrew? I know you just recently got one last year. Mm-hmm. We both have the same one now. We have the Striker Climate ice suit, which is amazing. Not affiliated with Striker, but they make good stuff. There's lots of brands that carry really good float suits though, but kind of describe what you like about a float suit and why you think it's so important.
So the float suits are awesome because it's basically a snowmobile suit or like a snow suit. It has full bibs. The Striker ones that we have, they have like reinforced knee pads. So they're designed to be, you're not going to rip up your knees and stuff. But the importance of it is throughout the suit, both the bibs and also the jacket especially, there's like life jacket foam, the same stuff that's in your old Mustang blue and orange life jackets from back in the day. It's life jacket foam that's sewn directly into the coat, so it's much more comfortable than trying to use a different flotation device because you're just wearing it. So the purpose of it, again, it's super warm. you stay warm in this thing all day, which is fantastic. But if you do happen to fall in, it's not a dry suit. It's not anything like that. You're still going to get wet. You're still going to be cold, but you're not going to sink because if you wear normal winter gear, like regular snow pants and a regular down coat, and you fall through, you no longer weigh, 240 pounds like me. If I fall in wearing that, I now weigh 340 pounds because it just soaks up water and you can't move it. And you trying to pull that weight out of the water is really tough. With a float suit, at least you're going to stay buoyant. You're going to stay on top of the water so that you can, just slide yourself out of the ice, hopefully.
Yeah. So you can see why it's such an important item, especially early ice. We're not those guys, but there are guys and girls that go out there as soon as they can walk on the ice. I'm talking 2.5 inches of ice. Not recommended. If you're one of those people, good for you, but there is a big risk of falling in because 3 inches of ice on the lake isn't going to be 3 inches everywhere. Things change fast. We're not going to get into like all the different stuff like spud bars, but a spud bar is something that's how you test the ice. You need that as well. That would be something that you definitely want in addition to, ice spikes and a float suit. For me, my wife made me get one. Like I wanted one too, but she's like, "Oh, you're going ice fishing." She'd always get all stressed out that I was going to like fall in and die. So she bought me a float suit. Well, technically I bought it, but she said she bought it for me. But it made her feel better and it made me feel better. So it's something that it provides you that peace of mind when you're going out. Again, when you go in the middle of February and it's like, 20 inches of ice, you're probably never going to fall in through the ice. The ice is very thick, but like Andrew mentioned, it's also a heck of a warm suit. Like me and Andrew's suits, the climates you put them on, it's minus 35 out there. You don't feel it at all, especially if you layer up. It's amazing. They're just great. Now, one side tangent, and I will argue anyone on this because I've heard it all. Believe me, I worked at tackle shops. I've heard it all. Float suits are expensive. I agree. They're very expensive. There are some budget ones that are not bad, but I've heard so many people say, well, I'm just going to wear an inflatable life jacket over top of my snowmobile suit. That's just as good. It'll keep me floating, blah, blah, blah. That's not true. That doesn't work. And I'll tell you why. Well, one of the biggest and best manufacturers of inflatable life jackets, Mustang. They make some of the best stuff. They make all kinds of amazing products. I have one of their life jackets. They're inflatable life jackets. They're PFDs. Even if you have an automatic one. So when it senses water, when you're submerged in water, it will auto inflate. Or there's some that are manual where you actually have to pull a little thing and then it inflates. Now, you may think that's a good idea because you can buy an inflatable life jacket now for about $150. You can buy them at Costco for like $99, like cheaper brands. Putting that over top of your snowsuit may seem like a good idea because it's going to save you hundreds of dollars. You already have a snowsuit. Why don't you just wear that? Well, unfortunately, these inflatable life jackets are not designed at all to be used in below freezing temperatures. So I actually looked up an article on Mustang.com and I thought I'd just read some of these things. I'm not going to try to put this in my own words because it's too complicated. Just kidding. Thermodynamics? Like what? Just kidding. So they say, this is what Mustang says. It says, our inflatable devices are typically approved for use by Transport Canada and the United States Coast Guard based on testing conducted by independent underwriter laboratories. It goes into a whole bunch of stuff about the standards for these test things, all this stuff, blah, 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 boring, boring, boring. And it says these standards stipulate the inflatable device must be marked do not use below freezing. This marking is because cold air below 0 degrees and cold water near 0 degrees can negatively affect the inflator's ability to puncture the CO2 gas cylinder, both manual and automatic. Thus, this device does not inflate. If it does inflate, the time to achieve buoyancy can also be significantly delayed. It is possible the device will not produce the full amount of required buoyancy. And it goes on to talk about as the temperature approaches freezing, your inflatable flotation device will provide less buoyancy and inflate extremely slowly. There's a whole article. I'm not going to read through all of it, but long and the short of it is those things are not designed to work in cold temperatures. Just because it inflates during the summer, do a little bit of research. You wouldn't want to risk your life just because you were uneducated on some safety thing that doesn't even work. You're like, it's fine. I'll just wear this. And then you fall in. You're like, it's not working. Yeah, it's easy to find that information. Now, I'm not dissing you if you're trying to do that. I'm just saying that's a wake-up call. If you think you're just going to do that, it's not worth doing because they don't work. Now, the other option you can do, it's going to be bulky, it's going to be fat, you're going to look a little bit heavy, is wear an actual life jacket, a foam life jacket. Now, that doesn't have to inflate. It is, again, you're going to look a bit like the Michelin Man if you're wearing a snowsuit, and you're going to look like a bit of a dork wearing a life jacket on top. But if you fall in, it will keep you, it'll keep you floating because like Andrew said, a float suit is literally a coat with that material built into it. So it's very similar. So anyway, don't do that. Don't use an inflatable. Not recommended. The next thing that we'd like to mention quickly is a rope and a throw bag. Now, why is that something that is important, Andrew?
Well, If one person falls through the ice, there's a good chance that if you go up close to that edge, you too will fall through the ice. The best way you can help someone else is by being safe yourself. So there's always been safety rules, even in boats. Don't jump in the water to save someone who's drowning, because they will be maybe panicking and you'll drown with them. The safe way to do things is make sure you're safe and able to assist the other person. So the great thing with the throw rope and bag is you can do so from a safe distance without risk of them, of you falling into the same broken up ice or same thin ice that they fell through.
And that's one thing that you can buy. They're not that expensive. You can throw it in your fishing bag. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And if you ever need to use it, it's going to be worth its weight in gold. You don't want to be scrambling around thin ice looking for a rope. You don't have who brings rope when they're ice fishing? No.
And they usually come on a carabiner you can clip right to your jacket, anything like that. And it's handy and accessible. So again, these safety things, you want them to be useful right away. You don't want them, like as you said, in storage in your bag. I got it in a hut storage behind me as I'm towing it. It's of no use there. So just making sure that it is in an accessible area for all of these things, because you don't have time when disaster strikes.
It's so true. I thought we could cover quickly ice cleats. Andrew has some cool ones on his boots we'll talk about. I've had some bad, cheap ones that I bought that were trash. So I'm sure if we've always gone to the fishing store and you see they have these plastic ones and they have these built-in little tiny, metal claws on the bottom, just little pegs on the bottom. And they stretch over your boot and it's okay, it's got a little tiny picks on the bottom. And I used them for one day and then I looked in the bottom and I was like, why is my boot slip? And half of the metal pegs had actually popped out of it. I was like, what the heck? And they were they were cheap. They were $30 for a set. So I took them back and I was like, what the heck? Trash. So I didn't like those. Now, if you spend a little bit more money and get the metal ones, they have big metal ones with big claws on it, almost like standing on bear claws in the ice, and you will not slip. They occasionally fall off your boot. I've had them fall off once or twice, but that's after using them many, many times. You can get metal ones that go all the way around. If you do get the plastic ones with the big claws on the bottom, I've seen guys, they get they'll get bungee cords, the little ones you can buy at the dollar store, and they can actually loop around your boot so they won't fall off. I'm going to try that this year, see how it works. But Andrew has some cool ones that he picked up. I think it was at the Sportsman Show or the Ice Fishing Show.
Ice Fishing Show last year. Yeah, because I've gone through a few pairs of those kind of crampons that you just stretch over your boot, and I always lose one. On the first trip out with it, every single time I lose one.
Yep. You just see him slip. I'm like, what happened?
But I found they're really cool. They're eye grip studs. And so you can get them for your truck tires, your quad tires, but they also make them in really smaller form with it, where the thread on it is very small. And they essentially screw into the bottom of your boot. And it has a little stud. They can have flat-sided. They have pointed ones. But you can put as many as you want in the bottom of your boot, or just a few just in the toe, however you want it. But you just screw them into your boot, and it's not, you can get them at different lengths for how long the overall length is. So for me, I just got the short ones. I think they're a 1/4 inch, which does not penetrate anywhere close to the depth of the rubber sole of the boot. So it's not going to stab you in the foot. But I haven't lost a single one at the bottom of my boot yet. And in fact, I just got new boots this year, and I can unscrew them from my old boots and put them in these new ones. So they can last a long time. I've been extremely satisfied with them. I found they're a little bit pricier than just the stretch over crampons, but again, I haven't lost it, and I've used them multiple times. And for me, I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I'm actually going to pick up a pair this winter. Again, I'm going to link everything down in the show notes below. So if you're interested in checking those out, again, we're not affiliated with them. We're just recommending gear that works for us. Definitely check that out, because it's definitely a cool solution. And you don't have to try awkwardly to stretch this plastic thing over your boot every time you let go and it shoots off and hits someone, kills them. It's just bad every single time.
I find a lot of them are designed to fit over top of shoes. There are people who don't want to slip on their driveway and stuff. And so when you're trying to stretch it over a size 13 winter boot, they don't make them big enough.
It gets sketchy. So we're going to kind of wrap up the ice fishing part of it. Again, we're going to talk more about that next month. But one thing that kind of reminded me of Andrew's story is getting a proper hut. And unlike Andrew, you don't have to try to make a hut. Huts have come down in price significantly. You can buy a reasonably priced, non-thermal, just, windbreaker style hut for a few $100 now. And if you you spend a few extra bucks, you're looking at $400 or $500, you can buy a nice thermal hut, which is what we did. And it is night and day. Thermal huts are fantastic. You get inside, you turn the heater on. That's another essential item. In my opinion, it is essential to being comfortable outside, is having a heater. A little buddy heater. They're great little heaters. We have the attachment hose so we can hook it up to a full 20-pound propane tank. The problem with the buddy heaters is the little 1-pound propane tanks. They're convenient. They're great if you're just going out for a few hours. But those bottles of propane, they only last an hour or two, and they're $10 a piece. And I know you're not supposed to refill them, but even if you refill them, it's just a pain in the butt. So what we did is we bought the adapter and just a 20-pound tank, and that thing will last days. Running it full time, it'll last days. It's amazing. You get in the hut and it's freezing outside. Like it's minus 30, and you get in the hut, you turn on the heater and it's cold. And 10 minutes later it starts to warm up. And then eventually you have to turn it down, and you're opening the windows in the hut. You're like, whew, this is weird. And you're sitting in a nice chair, relaxing. You take your coat off. Like, it's nice. It's so nice. It's comfortable. And when I go fishing, I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't think anyone's like, I want to be uncomfortable. No, like having a heater and a nice thermal hunt, it is a bit of an investment. Me and Andrew split it last year. And we're like, you know what? We have to get this, because we had a non-thermal hut for years before and it was fine. But when it was cold, remember that trip we went lake trout fishing and it was like minus 35?
Yep.
It was so cold. We were just sitting there chattering. We're wearing like, nice float suits and stuff. But when you're sitting out there minus 35 for like 10 hours, it eventually catches up to you and you freeze to death.
and that's why I even went ice fishing again. We had a heater in the hut and a nice thermal hut. Again, night and day difference. But by the end of the day, my feet were still cold because Jesse's were fine, but I still was rocking old like Walmart special winter boots. I put on like 3 layers of socks and stuff in them, but there's not enough thermal lining in the cheaper boots, I find, especially for a full day on the ice. Because even with the heater in the hut, the heat is not on ice level. You're still getting all that cold coming up off the ice. But with a good set of winter boots, your toes are usually your first thing. They're going to get cold and have frostbite or just be so uncomfortable you want to get off the ice. So just because you have a heater in a hut, make sure you have all the right winter equipment still.
Speaking of frostbite, Andrew's mentioning that disgusting thing. I thought we could talk a bit about frostbite, just to reiterate the fact that it is something that is serious. I know everyone jokes like, oh, I can't feel my toes. It's like, yeah, that's great. But what if they turn black and fall off? Not good. So I thought we could just cover a little bit about frostbite, because I don't know that much about it. So I'm sure we've all got super cold. Maybe our hands are in the water. Maybe you're just outside fishing. Your hands get wet, not even wet. You're just cold, and your fingers just start to get a little bit stiff. You ever tried to text someone on your phone and your fingers are stiff and you just keep, you're like, I can't spell. Like, why am I dumb? That's not frostbite, but that's just getting cold. But understanding frostbite, it's actually damage to the skin or the underlying tissues caused by extreme cold. Not just a little bit cold, but extreme cold. Now, there's different types of frostbite. So first degree, which they actually is like, it's called frost nip. It's like, did you get frostbite? No, I got frost nip. Put on a shirt.
What's the third stage? Frost mauling? Like,
first degree is the only one with a nickname. That's weird. Anyway,
yeah,
frost
we have
nip.
some nicknames for the severe one.
You can come up with one. First degree affects only the outer layers of the skin, turning it white and leaving it numb. So I'm sure we've all been there. I'm sure if you've gone ice fishing, you've been there 100%. Second degree, skin becomes white or blue and feels frozen, but the tissue underneath is not yet damaged. That sounds kind of sketchy, but I mean, it's not damaged yet. So, could be worse, I guess.
I have been to that stage, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Just once. And it pins and needles and pain you feel as it's coming back up to temperature when you get home. It lasts for hours. It hurts a lot.
Third degree, deeper layers of skin are damaged, turning it colors such as bluish gray or white. What are the risk factors for people that are fishing? Well, things that can cause you to get frostbite are wind exposure. Wind can accelerate heat loss, increasing the risk of frostbite. We all know the wind chill. When you look, it's like, oh, it's minus 10. But with the wind chill, it's minus 370. That wind sucks all of the heat right out of you. Even in the fall, when we're musky fishing, it's like, oh, it's a nice day, and the wind picks up, and you instantly get freezing. You're like, oh. Ugh. Wet conditions. Wet clothing or gear can lead to faster heat loss. I'm sure we've all released a fish or got our like our sleeve wet. You're like, oh, grab
Mhm.
something in the water and your sleeve's wet, and in the fall or winter it doesn't dry and your whole arm just is freezing. Oh, I hate that. Inadequate clothing. So if you're not wearing proper layers or protective gear, it can leave your skin exposed to cold. You can't just go out ice fishing and not wear like a hat and mitts. You need all that stuff or else you will get frostbite. Now, how can we prevent something like this from happening? Well, it mentions that we should dress in layers. The first layer is moisture wicking base layer, and insulated mid layers, and waterproof outer layers. Now, I thought that's funny because even like recently I've been musky fishing, me and Andrew, in the fall, and we're wearing our bibs, like winter bibs, but they're waterproof ones. So something that isn't waterproof, that's warm, you're like, oh, it's warm. But when you're ice fishing, there's oftentimes a lot of slush, a lot of like water. If those things soak up water, you are going to freeze to death. Like not to death, but you're going to be really cold. So get some good quality stuff that's actually waterproof, especially boots. Andrew was saying about his boots being crappy. He got new ones recently, but I have like the waterproof Baffin Titan boots, and they're just like a rubber boot with like super thick insulation inside. And I can kick slush from the hole when I'm drilling holes. I can walk through water, all that stuff, and my feet stay bone dry. So stuff like that is very, very important. Protect your extremities. Wear insulated gloves, hats, face coverings to protect your hands, ears, and face. Even if you look dumb. I always say, like, Andrew has this really big, stupid hat that he wears. It's warm as heck. He looks like a moron, but guess what? He's toasty and warm. So don't worry about what other people think. This isn't a fashion show, people. It's fishing. Another thing that it says that we should recognize early signs of frostbite. If you're feeling numbness, if you feel loss in the affected areas, your skin starts changing colors, that's not good. So it's like if your skin turns white, grayish, or blue, that's bad. Who would have thought?
I'm chameleon man, but it only works in extreme cold temperatures.
It's a trick that only works once.
Again, staying warm and obviously, but is a really important part of dressing in layers, because we talked before on this podcast about hypothermia. We had a whole interesting fishing fact about that Jesse did. But if you're walking out on the ice and you're like sweating because you're exerting yourself and you're all nice and toasty, and then you stop, you drill your hole, especially if you're drilling it by hand, you're scooping it all out, and then you're just like dripping sweat, you're soaking all your insulating layers. And so dressing in layers on the walk out, oftentimes Jesse and I will have our coats fully like zipped open, blowing in the wind because, we're warm. And so the goal that I try and reach is I don't want to sweat on the walk out, but as soon as we stop working, you can zip everything up and you're all nice and toasty. So just important that if you can easily develop frostbite, if you have hypothermia because you were sweating and you decided now's a good time to take off all my clothes because you're not thinking straight.
Terrible. Now, what should you do if you suspect that you have frostbite? Well, first one, seek shelter, move to a warmer environment immediately. Warm affected areas, use warm, not hot, warm water or body heat to gently warm the skin, and seek medical attention, get professional medical help as soon as possible. I'm going to go into a quick little story time, if you don't mind right now, about a fishing adventure that I just had on Saturday, because it kind of goes into this next point. So I had a day fishing with Travis of Kawartha Fishing Charters on Saturday. And Travis is a hardcore musky guy, hardcore. So he messaged me and he's like, hey, dude, you want to go fishing for musky? And I was like, absolutely. Like, why would I say no to that? And he's like, what days are you free? The only day that we could do it was like the first weekend in December. And I've never fished musky that late myself, because usually by then, we fish out of small boats. So I was kind of skeptical. I'm like, how good could it be? Like, I've heard of guys catching them in late fall, but December seems kind of sketchy. A lot of the lakes have ice on them already. So we went up there, he took me out, and we fished for musky, and the water was below 40 degrees. We were dressed up in our full ice bibs, pretty much. I had on a toque. I have the toque right here. Look, I have his toque because it's the Kawartha fishing hat. Travis also has his own apparel brand, so I'm going to link that below as well. But Travis, super nice guy. I learned so much from this guy in like 5 or 6 hours of fishing with him. It is insane to fish with people that fish all the time and guides like that. They know so much about fishing. It's insane. I'm so jealous because like they're out on the water all the time. So for a regular average angler like me, I'm just like, I have no idea. Like what, like this time of year, like what are we doing? He's telling me, he's like, yeah, don't worry. It's going to be a great day. We're going to catch a bunch of fish. And I was like, so skeptical. I'm like, it is freezing outside. Everything was freezing. My reel was filling with ice. The line would fill with ice. All the guides were just chocked with ice. Every like 20 minutes, we were chipping ice out of our guides. The reels weren't working properly because the T-wing system was just full of ice, like chipping it out. Spraying WD-40 and stuff on the rods and the line and stuff so that line wouldn't freeze on it and all this stuff. It was pretty crazy. We ended up catching 4 muskie and missed 2 other ones. So 6, technically rose 6 fish, got 4 in the boat, and 2 over 40 inch. It was an insane day. But one thing that he was telling me before we went out, he was like, make sure you bring something hot to drink. We always do. Me and Andrew, what do we always bring?
Giant thermos full of coffee.
Yes, you got to have it. So that made me think, does drinking hot drinks on cold days actually work? What do you think, Andrew?
I know a little bit of the science behind it. It can definitely
That's a good
help.
answer. I think it's one of those things that everyone just thinks that it's going to make you warmer. For one, holding a warm cup of coffee or tea in your hand, it does provide comfort to your hands. So like say you're freezing outside your ice fishing and someone hands you a hot cup of coffee and you're holding it in your hands. Obviously that is providing you some warmth through your hands. And when you drink something hot, it does give you a temporary boost of body temperature. How much does that go up? Well, not that much actually. So this is the science. Heat from the drink does raise your core temperature slightly for a short period, usually around 20 minutes. So if you have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, you will feel a slight temperature increase for about 20 minutes. This is the kicker. Like Andrew said, the sensation of warmth is often more psychological than physical. So that's interesting. So hot drinks, obviously they're like a staple. Everyone has them. They're like, oh, you got to drink it, blah, blah, blah. But generally speaking, adding just like our body is mostly made of water, right? Like everyone's like, oh, your body's like whatever, 70% of water. Adding like 1 cup of warm liquid into your body, it's not actually raising the temperature of your body that much, interestingly enough. So it only says that it actually only raises the temperature of your body 2.5% for 20 minutes. Now, is that a bad thing? No, because even if it is psychological and you have a cup of coffee in your hand and it makes you think that you're getting warmer, that's a good thing, right? It's kind of like, the placebo effect. Like, here, Andrew, I have this magic warming coffee for you. You should drink it. I do agree, though. It does make me feel warmer. I do like drinking coffee, hot drinks during the winter. And that day that I went out with Travis, we were drinking coffee. And if it only keeps you slightly warmer for 20 minutes at a time, the only problem is this. This is the worst thing. You have to drink coffee every 20 minutes then to stay warm. And that means that you're going to have to pee more, which means that you're going to have to go pee more, which means that you're going to get cold when you have to go pee in the cold. So it's a vicious cycle of being cold, going pee, having to warm up and drinking more coffee, and then having to go pee again.
Well, that's why the ice fishing catheters are a thing, right?
Ew.
Am I the only one? It means it lets you retain that body heat that you like are losing. You just keep like a nice little sack on the side of you.
Drinking hot coffee, it does definitely, hot coffee, hot tea, even hot water, as Travis said, even if you don't like that kind of stuff, just drink hot water, just get something into you. It does have some effect on how comfortable you're going to be. I just thought briefly I'd talk a little bit about some of the lures that I was using on Friday or Saturday last week for muskie. You think this time of year, Andrew, when you're fishing muskie, how are you fishing like your baits when the water temp is below 40?
Not aggressively fast. Lots of, slow rolling or pull pause.
Oh yeah. So one thing that I'm terrible at, or I just don't like at all, is fishing slow. Like I hate it. He kept looking at me. He's like, slower. I was like, so we started off. I actually caught my first fish on a tube, which was great. It wasn't a huge fish. We didn't even bump it. It was probably about 30 inches. Nice fish though. That was cool. And that was within like half an hour of us fishing. Like when we started to get out, and I was like, holy smokes, like within half an hour caught a fish. Like that's pretty good. And then literally like within half an hour again, he caught one, and he was fishing. I think he was fishing a tube or something. I wasn't paying attention, but it was pretty cool because he had this fish on, and it was a bigger fish. I think it was like 43 inch, and it was like going around the boat, and I had the net, but the net was frozen. All the mesh was like frozen together. And I was like trying to whip it open and like dipping it in the water. And finally I got it open, and the fish came around the front of the boat, and I just scooped it just in time, and the bait flew out of his mouth. Like it shook its head. And we were like, "Ah!" So that was the second fish. That was pretty cool. And then it got to the point where I was just trying different baits. So another bait that's really popular this time of year is glide baits. This bait I'm holding up, this is the Hellhound, the Hell Puppy. I've caught a few musky on this. I've caught my PB on this as well. And I decided to chuck it on because it's a confidence bait now. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to try it, right? I was zigzagging that around, had a fish grab it. I set the hook. Somehow it got off. It's like, that sucks. 5 minutes later, I caught another fish in a different spot, but I caught another one on this bait. So I'm very happy with this bait. I know Andrew wants to get one. The Hellhound.
I have seen Jesse catch many a muskie right in front of me. I kid you not, pretty much every time he catches a muskie on that, it's in the first 5 minutes of him putting it on.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And then he'll like catch one. He's like, all right, time for me to try other things. Like, why aren't you using that bait more?
I like trying new stuff. This bait has caught quite a few muskies for me this year. And again, we're not expert muskie guys, but learn how to use a glide bait. They catch fish. It has a slow gliding action back and forth. And as it pauses and slowly sinks, those fish, even in cold water, like the other day, they just come up and grab it. It wasn't, all the fish hit very softly. It was very soft. Like the first fish I hit, it just felt like a tick of when you're jig fishing. That's it. And I pulled into the fish. It was a fish. The glide bait fish, same thing. Twitch as it was sinking, just slightly felt like your line got mushy. I pulled back. It was a muskie. It was crazy. And then the third fish, which was the biggest fish of the day, it was 43 and a quarter, something like that. I beat Travis by 1/4 of an inch, just so everyone knows. Yeah, but I did have front boat advantage. But I did try this bait. Me and Andrew picked these up. This is the Water Wolf Lures Shadzilla X. Now, to describe this bait, if you're listening, it is an 11-inch long, soft plastic jerk bait. Pretty much. It's super weird. I've never seen anything like it. It doesn't have any action. If you just cast it out and reel it in, it does nothing. It's like a big fluke. Like in the bass world, like fishing a fluke. Imagine an 11-inch
big
long
split tail fluke.
Yeah. And it's hollow inside. It's got 2 hooks. And I was talking to Mike from Water Wolf, and I said to him, like, this lure really intrigues me, but I don't know if I should get one. He's like, yeah, they're good. You need to know how to fish them properly. So when I was fishing with Mike, he showed me, he's like, yeah, it's just short pulls and it sinks very slowly, which this time of year in the late fall, that's what you want. You want something that's has a very slow fall. When you pull it, instead of giving it a really hard jerk, you just give it like a short, steady, non-crazy jerk, and it kind of just twitches erratically and then sinks and then twitches. And I was fishing it really slow, and I was like, yeah, it looks really good in the water, but for some reason I was just like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. Like, I don't know. I think I should put the glide bait back on. And Travis, he was like, no, man, try it for 5 more minutes. You got to show Mike that it catches fish. And literally the next cast, I was twitching it back to the boat, and this is a bright color. This is Tennessee shad. So it's like very bright, like white with orange on it. It was floating down, and then all of a sudden, like 10 feet from the boat, a muskie just came up and grabbed it, and the tail was hanging out of its mouth. And I looked down, and I just felt like a tap. And I looked down, I pulled up, and then he's like, is that a fish? And I set the hook right into it, like right beside the boat. And it was just like thrashing around. Anyway, if you want to see a picture of that, check out our Instagram. But I did get some nice bite marks in this. It's funny. There's bite marks up on the head and in the mid because the fish grabbed it like this and the tail was hanging out of his mouth. So it was pretty cool. I'd say the last story I'll tell you is I'm a huge fan of Medusas, the Chaos Tackle Medusa. It's a big pull pause bait with 3 rubber tails. And Travis was like, yeah, those are good, but I lose a lot of fish on them because there's lots of rubber. And I was like, I don't know. I cast it out. I had a muskie grab it, had it halfway to the boat, and the lure flies out of his mouth. And he was just standing there. He's like,
Always listen to your guide. That's important.
Yes. So anyway, we're going to actually have him on as a guest coming up in the new year. We're going to be talking all about muskie fishing. Travis at Kawartha Fishing Charters is an absolute hammer. To go out in December and have a 5-fish day or a 4-fish day, absolutely insane. If we had caught every fish that we had hooked, we would have had 6 fish in the boat, which is crazy for December. But anyway, we were wearing gloves. We were wearing hats, full bibs. We had hot drinks. We were ready for the cold weather. You need that kind of stuff. Andrew wasn't there either because he had other things to do. That's fine.
Yeah, important things. Family comes first.
Muskie comes first for me. Just kidding. My wife's like, what? So I thought we could just talk briefly about some of the ice fishing stuff that you need to get ready, because ice fishing season for a lot of people, it's already here. But for many of us, we're waiting. We're probably, looking through fishing magazines or watching, YouTube videos of like the best lures to get. I've had a few people message us on Instagram already about like, what lure should we get for ice fishing? I thought we could talk between me and Andrew what some of our favorite things to bring ice fishing are, just for general purpose. So bait and lures. Let's talk about like general purpose, if that even makes sense. But like for any species, what are some of your top baits in whatever sizes that you're going to always pack when you're going ice fishing, Andrew?
Top baits, a jigging spoon of some sort. It's like the Williams jigging spoon, or even like the Williams whitefish, or even the Williams wobbler, anything like that. I also just an assortment of soft plastic, depending what I'm going for. Again, I might be using microplastics and like really finesse jig heads, or I might be using larger jigs and soft plastic, like tube jigs, something for lake trout. But that's pretty much all I fish most of the time is some jigging spoons and some soft plastic on the jig head. Those are kind of mainstays. I always keep some, but I'll let you kind of talk more about them because I know you do well. But like vertical jigging minnows and stuff like that, those are classic as well. But I know Jesse always outfishes me with them. I don't know why they don't work well for me, but I guess I just have the wrong cadence with my movements. But I do much better with jigs. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So what Andrew's speaking about is like the jigging wraps, like the Rapala jigging wraps. Every other brand has some kind of jigging wrap style bait. The jigging wrap, though, is the OG. It's the original. They are fantastic lures. And the same thing happened to me. You always read fishing magazines. Back when we grew up, there wasn't YouTube. So we'd read fishing magazines or fishing books, and it would be like ice fishing, jigging wrap. And I bought a few of them, and I just did not catch anything on them. And everyone would be like, man, you got to get a jigging wrap. They're amazing. So I just forced myself to use one.
They were always the first lure mentioned, or like on the front cover of Ontario Out of Doors, like I'm holding the perch with them, or a pike, like walleye. Everything was on, like it was the biggest thing, and they never produced for me. I kept buying them because I kept seeing them, but I never caught.
No, they're absolutely fantastic lures. You just have to get the cadence down to fish them properly, and they come in so many different sizes. Like one of my favorites perch baits is actually a very small, like one of the smallest sizes of the jigging wrap in the goby color, because it looks just like a little juvenile goby just hopping along the bottom. And I don't fish it like swinging high around. I kind of just hop it on the bottom, like bang it on the bottom to cause a little bit of some dust. But you can get them all the way up to fair size ones that you can use for pike and lake trout fishing. So there's a lot of ways to fish them. You can put a minnow head on the treble. That will help you too. But like Andrew said, like I honestly think that if you just gave me a jigging spoon and a tungsten head with a little plastic on it for perch, like perch panfish, the little jig with the little plastic on it, and then a jigging spoon in different sizes, I'd be happy for ice fishing. That'd be good. I could literally fish a jigging spoon all day. They're so effective. Like we've caught everything from perch to Andrew's caught lake trout, big pike. Like I'll be fishing little perch spoons and catch a giant pike. It's insane. And when I fish for pike, nothing. Absolutely nothing. When I fish for perch, pike every single time. So make sure that you have, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put a little list of fishing lures that we recommend down in the show notes below. So you can check those out. A bunch of different jigging spoons. Again, they're all similar. I feel like when I worked at the tackle shop, every brand has like almost the same thing. There's very few brands that have something crazily unique. So just pick the brand that you like, that you can afford. Something with good quality components, good hooks. You should be fine with any major brand, and just pick the most basic colors. Like you don't have to have anything crazy. Like one of the best colors ever, Andrew, silver. You can't beat silver. Get some glow when you're fishing early morning or like at night. It doesn't have to be crazy. Ice fishing doesn't have to be crazy. I think people overcomplicate it for sure, but don't need to do it.
Do you remember that one bait? I think it was the Nomad. Was it Blue Fox? And it was like a hunk of steel of a spoon. But it had a chain with a single hook on the bottom that had a little glow bead on it. And you can still get them. I know now, like going to places like Sale, actually just at Sale a few days ago, I saw they had a whole bunch of the chains you can buy, the chain and the hook that you can put on whatever spoon you want. But I really like those for fishing, like when you're going for perch or whatnot, or walleye and you have live bait. I love hooking a minnow on that because it has like this heavy weight that gets it down there, but it has all this like freedom of like a couple inches of chain to move around on. And I really like that for a real natural presentation of it. But that's another one that I always have with me for when I go ice fishing as well.
Yeah, I've done well with the little Castmasters too with the chain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is. just the extra chain. Another cool bait that I think both of us were using was that Lindy perch talker. It's just like literally like a little chain of beads that rattle together and you just like jiggle it. Fishing through the ice, it's so funny because you think that the water's clear, the fish have a good look at all the stuff, but they'll come up and just hit a spoon hanging in the water. It's like, it looks like nothing. It's just like a piece of metal hanging there and they're like, oh, what is that? And they grab it.
It's funny too, like oftentimes they don't even grab the spoon. They don't inhale it. They'll nibble on the hook. They're like, what's this coming off of the thing that's flashy? And that's what they'll bite.
It's crazy. So the thing is, as we've discussed this episode, fishing in cold weather, especially when you're ice fishing, it may be, late season musky fishing or steelhead fishing or ice fishing. It's very uncomfortable and it could be dangerous. So if you take some of these tips to heart about having the proper equipment, again, we're going to go nutso in January about talking about that in our ice fishing episode. It's actually a double episode. That's how crazy it is. We're going to cover literally everything. And the thing is, we have a guest on, so we don't even have to cover it. They're going to do it all for us. So we're just going to sit back and relax. It's going to be amazing.
We'll be telling stories of all the things that we're learning we should have done for years and haven't been.
Yes. So anyway, that's the episode for today. I thought that we would just quickly mention one thing. Now, this is not a podcast giveaway, but this is an Instagram giveaway that I'm talking about right now. But we're actually doing a very large sale giveaway. We're giving away a very large, I'm not going to mention the amount, check it out on our Instagram, but we're giving away a large gift card from Sail Outdoors. Now, we partnered up with Sail this year to do some content on the podcast. This is an Instagram part of it, and they gave us a pretty chunky gift card to give away. And we're giving that away on our social media page on Instagram, so check it out.
Jesse said he couldn't give it to me. What a guy.
Yeah. Well, technically they're drawing it, so we have nothing to do with it. But if you win this gift card, I'll tell you, it's enough that you could buy yourself a fish finder, an ice hut. Okay, a fish finder or an ice hut, not both. We're not that generous. But it's a sizable gift card. So definitely check that out. If you're on our social media, make sure you're following us. Make sure you're following Sail as well. And the posts on our Instagram, if you find it there, it'll tell you all the details. This giveaway is just for Canadian residents. If you're listening from another place, unfortunately, sorry, we're dealing with a Canadian company right here, but we'll try to get another giveaway going in the future for everyone else. But that's a cool giveaway. One more thing I would like to mention. We've been kind of teasing about some of our guests that we're going to get on in the new year. We have a few really good ones lined up. I'm going to give you some teasers, okay? You want to hear them, Andrew? Andrew doesn't even know these.
I know a few, and I tell you, I'm already excited, so I can't wait to hear some others.
Yes. So as I mentioned, this isn't in any order because the year is already all wacko, but we're actually going to get on Travis from Kawartha Fishing Charters. He is a musky hammer. We're going to get him on maybe late May, early June, something like that, so you can get ready for musky season. We're also going to have Jen and Scott on from Fin Addiction. They're also guides that fish out in the East End. We're going to get them on for a musky episode as well. They are on the water a lot. I think they caught 90 muskie this year, something like that. Yeah, a lot of muskie. It's insane. So they're going to do that as well. We also have another episode in the spring with our very popular Arthur from Angling Art, which is going to be a double steelhead episode. We did that with Angling Art this spring that just passed. That was a very popular episode and people wanted him back. So we got him back. We had to bribe him a bit, but he's back. We also have next month, we have an episode with an ice hut operator. It's going to be pretty cool. These are people that fish through the ice a lot and they have lots of tips. They're going to cover a lot of safety stuff. We scratched the surface about a bit of it today. They're going to go in depth. They're also going to go into the seasonal patterns of different species of fish that they fish for on their lake. And we have some pretty sick giveaways from them as well. So that's going to be pretty cool. Now, we do have most of the guests lined up, but if you have someone that you'd like to hear from and they are a guide or in the fishing industry, please email us at averageontarioanglers@gmail.com. I was like, .com? No, that's not an email address. Just send us an email. I'll put it in the show notes. But send us an email and we'll see what we can do. And don't be like, hey, I want you guys to get Bob Azumi on. Like, come on. It's not going to happen. Maybe. Who knows? But if you have any
if you have his number personally, you give him our contact information. If he wants to, have him hit us up.
If you are Bob Azumi, you can come on. But anyway, if you have any good suggestions, let us know. Again, we can't take everyone on. There's only so many podcasts a year, and we have to have certain people do different episodes pertaining to what species we have openings for. But if you have some good suggestions, we're always open to hear. And don't literally say you want Andrew to be a guest on his own podcast, because that would be terrible.
I'm going to interview myself. It's what everyone's been waiting for.
That's going to be a special segment next year. Andrew interviews himself for an interesting fishing fact. Anyway, this was a fun episode. We are really looking forward to the new year. Again, our podcast is going to change completely. I think you guys are going to be very happy. We're actually going to talk about a lot of the changes that's going to happen in our next episode. We're actually going to do a whole rundown on what we're going to do in the new year. It's going to be fantastic. But before we end this episode, we have, as tradition states, the quote of the week. And to handle that, we have the man with the Musky Maniac's hat that has been sweated through, Andrew.
The quote of the week is, when you catch a 50-inch muskie, you have to let your buddy have another, fishing trip of his own to make himself feel a bit better.
That has nothing to do with being cold. Just kidding. That was cold.